Awesome. We're live.
Woohoo!
There we go. Now we're started. Thanks. We have a couple of viewers here, some folks watching on YouTube as well. My name is Springboard for the Nikki, who's sitting right here with me. Nikki Hunt is the Director of Health Programs at Springboard for the Arts. Nora Grant, who's the Community Programs Coordinator at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. And Hunter Franks, who's the founder of the League of Creative Interventionists and the Neighborhood Postcard Project. Thanks to all of you for being on this conversation with us. A little bit about Creative Exchange and why we have these really interesting, diverse artists who have these cool programs, why we're gathered here to talk today. Creative Exchange was this brainchild of coming out of Springboard for the Arts, which is an economic and community development organization based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Fergus Falls, and really thinking about what kind of work we're doing to help artists make a living and a life. That's the mission of Springboard for the Arts. And we wanted to take the work that we're doing and find other great arts-driven, community-based work that we know is out there and find ways of connecting those things together and really having a national conversation about the value and importance of artists and creativity in making a living and a life, in the values that they bring to community work. So earlier this year, in partnership with the Knight Foundation, and with Issue Media Group, which is a news network based out of Detroit and with online publications across the country, we launched Creative Exchange. And Creative Exchange tries to do three things. One, tell the stories of artists who are doing this creative, community-driven work, so that we know that we're not alone when we're trying to do this work, and to find inspiration from that. The second part of it is to share resources, practical toolkits, things that we know can and do work in community, that you can do as an individual artist, building partnerships, that you can do as a nonprofit or an arts organization or an arts council, to find new ways to bring artists into your programs and practices. We wanted to find the toolkits and the resources so people can make change happen in their communities. That's what Nora and Hunter and Nikki are doing with their programs and their toolkits. And then the third part of that is what we're all doing here today, is that we wanted to create a space for people to ask questions, to have conversations about these toolkits, and to get inspired to make change themselves. So we wanted to create an actual exchange of ideas as well as the exchange of the toolkits and the resources. So thanks to all of you who are watching us. You can tweet at Creative Exchange, which is at Create Exchange. It's an easy way to get a hold of us, and I'll be monitoring the Twitter feed as we have this conversation. So if you have questions, send them our way. You can also email whenever at creativeexchange@springboardforthearts.org, which is the longest email ever in the history of the internet. But it gets to me, and I will happily answer your questions or try and connect you to people who can answer your questions. Without further ado, then, I'd love to introduce the people who are going to talk about the toolkits they've created. And I'll start with Nikki Hunt, because she's sitting right here next to me in the Springboard offices in Lower Town, St. Paul, Minnesota. Hi, Nikki.
Hi.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then your background, and then we'll get into some toolkit stuff a little bit further down the line.
Yeah, so I'm Nikki. I'm a painter. I also work at Springboard for the Arts. I'm the healthcare director here. So basically my job is connecting artists to both healthcare and health insurance. So we're not a health insurance provider, we're not a healthcare provider, but we know those people who are. So we help artists navigate the system.
Awesome.
So that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah, very cool. Hunter Franks is on the line. He is the founder of the League of Creative Interventionists and the Neighborhood Postcard Project. Hi, Hunter.
Hey, how's it going?
Going really well. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
Yeah, so I am an artist, born in Los Angeles, got exposed to lots of different folks from lots of different areas there, and got to make friends with diverse populations, and I think that has sort of led me a little bit to where I am now. I went to college up in Portland and studied art and communication there, Lewis and Clark College. And then I've been in San Francisco for about 2.5 years and doing a lot of traveling in between there, including walking from Los Angeles to New Mexico, which was a lot of fun and also influenced where I am today, I think. So sort of all of these different things came together, and I realized what I really wanted to do with my art was figure out how to get people to interact that would not normally do so. So I've been doing that for about a year and a half now with a project called the Neighborhood Postcard Project, which uses positive stories collected on postcards from neighborhoods that are somewhat marginalized or underrepresented. And then we take those postcards and we mail them to random people in different neighborhoods. So those people are getting a surprise piece of mail with a positive and personal story of a neighborhood maybe they've never been to, or maybe they've only seen the negative side of on the news. Sort of breaking down barriers in this simple, light touch way. Also founded the League of Creative Interventionists, which is a global community of folks in different cities that meets once a month around a shared theme, and just goes out real simple, real lightweight, and does some sort of action, some intervention in public space. So it's not about talking about things. I mean, you know, Google Hangouts are great for inspiration, but then it's the second step of how do you enable those things to happen? What tools do you give people to actually go out and make change in the cities that they're so right now I'm on a grant from the Knight Foundation going to 4 different cities and for 3 weeks each, and doing creative interventions in each of those cities, seeking to break down social barriers and get people interacting. So right now I'm in Akron, Ohio for 3 weeks, and I've got to explore Akron, and glad to be a part of this today.
Awesome, thank you. And then the third person that we have here on this Hangout is Nora Grant, the Community Programs Coordinator at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. Hi, Nora.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, give us a little bit of your background and how you came to work at Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History.
So, right, I'm Nora, and I am also a visual artist, printmaker, and writer. And I went to school at UC Berkeley for English and printmaking, and I'm from Santa Cruz. So when I moved back after college, as so many students do after they graduate, I moved back home and started interning at the museum with pretty little knowledge about what the museum was up to, and quickly realized it was a really important world to be a part of. And I started working in public programs and then exhibit design, and then got hired on to develop this project called the Pop-Up Museum, which was something supported by the James Irvine Foundation. We received a grant called the Exploring Engagement Fund. And I worked exclusively on the Pop-Up Museum to use it as a tool for community engagement and to empower people to share their stories around objects. And I will go into what the Pop-Up Museum is in more detail soon, but now I've adopted more responsibilities at the museum, and I work with diverse community members and collaborations to co-create events together to build social capital here in Santa Cruz, and to really enforce this idea of community bonding and bridging.
Nice. Let's talk a little bit about what the things actually are. Talking about the Pop-Up Museum and sharing stories around an object. Can you expand on that, Nora? And then we'll talk about the actual things that we do.
Sure. So the Pop-Up Museum, the elevator pitch is that it's a museum created by the people who show up to participate. So it works by choosing a theme and location and then inviting people to bring an object on topic to share. And we lay out tables, and we've designed it to lay out empty gold frames or just empty frames that we picked up at a thrift store. And so when people come, they can put their object in a frame, and we have blank museum labels for them. So when they show up, they write a label, put their object in a frame, and voila, it's a museum and it's a community show and tell. I like to think of it as a potluck museum because it uses this potluck mentality of everybody bringing something to the table and it being created by a group of people rather than one source. So they usually last about 2 hours on one day, and they are very ephemeral in that sense. And each one has a different theme and theoretically a different collaborator and a different context. So they're almost like these bite-sized events that people can go to and learn more about X and then go back for later. We are very focused on collaboration, so I haven't done a pop-up without a collaborator. Maybe except for 2 that were just more experimental, figuring out the design format. Save for that, we've had pop-ups with different collaborators in Santa Cruz, and it's been a really great way for the museum to bring the museum outside of the museum and into the community, and also for us to experiment with themes and collaborations that we can do in a short-lived event and something that's more lightweight. They are sort of focused on intimate group dynamics, so the goal of the pop-up was not to create this really sensational, large festival-like event, but really more focused on creating a space where people could come and share meaningful stories and objects to them. And if there were 5 people that came to that, we didn't see that as a failure. We saw it as a step forward towards more sharing and intimate storytelling. So these objects kind of work as tools for bringing people together.
Very cool. Is it important to you guys that it is sort of time limited in that short sense, so that people really do have an opportunity to be together on a short period of time?
Yeah, we experimented with different times, and we have had pop-ups that last like 5 hours or are part of a larger event that lasts longer. But if it's just a pop-up on its own, that 2-hour window is a nice time that enables social overlap, and people, because we don't have a set curriculum for when people show up and what exactly they're supposed to do. It's very drop-in format, so we looked at 2 hours as a time where people would come and stay for a little while, and new people would come and leave, so we just got that nice mix of overlap there.
Very cool. Hunter, you do similar things with your interventions, it feels like, with having a space for people to come and to gather together as part of the League of Creative Interventionists in your art practice there. How did you start with the Neighborhood Postcard Project, which definitely has that gathering point of people writing stories together?
Yeah, the Postcard Project began, I was working at the Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation in San Francisco and got to work with youth in the Bayview neighborhood there, which is an underrepresented neighborhood, has challenges of crime, drug use, homelessness, etc. And we worked with kids there, and they said, you know, they heard about all these challenges that the neighborhood faces, but what they really wanted to do was change the perception of the neighborhood. They wanted people to not look at them and assume that they were poor or dangerous because they lived in a certain neighborhood. And so I sort of had just ended my time at the mayor's office then, and that was still very, very fresh on my mind, and I sort of started thinking about how I could help them change that perception. And I realized, you know, it's hard enough to talk to somebody face to face that you may even know. So how are you going to talk to, a person that is in a totally different neighborhood that you perceive as scary and dangerous? So I thought, how can you use something a little easier, sort of easier way into that relationship, and start breaking down those barriers with little steps and not just doing it overnight and trying to do it all at once. So the Postcard Project is really, I say it's the same thing as when you have a crush on somebody in middle school. You write them a little note, or you say, you ask your friend to tell their friend or something. You don't go straight up and say, because it's hard to just go straight up to somebody that you don't know and talk to them in this day and age. So it started off as sort of this light touch method to start getting people to interact. And so we collect a postcard from a neighborhood. Bayview was the first neighborhood in San Francisco, and then we would send that to a neighborhood on the other side of San Francisco. And the point being that those folks are then receiving a postcard with a story of a neighborhood that they, on the news, have probably only seen, shooting, killing, crime, etc. But the point is that there's positive stories there. They're just not hearing those positive stories. So it's not necessarily bringing people together in the same physical place too much. That has happened once. In the first 15 postcards I sent, the sender and the random recipient of the postcard actually met in person, which was really, really cool. And they had a great conversation about the community, about San Francisco, about stereotypes, etc. And so it has the potential to really bring folks together. But on its very basic level, it's simply that little note that you pass over that says, hey, like, I'm over here. It's not that bad. It's okay over here. Or it's it's really great over here. Then it's uncovering things that people may not know, or they may not want to get to know. So trying to get people out of the sort of comfort of everyday life and exploring new neighborhoods and new conversations and new people, and hopefully making some meaningful connections between those.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that artists do so well, is to figure out how to discover new narratives and share those in interesting ways. I also really like what you said about it being sort of a low stakes or a small step way to start that conversation. because I think that was something that was on Springboard's mind when you were talking about the artist access to healthcare and how we get a hold of that. So do you want to talk a little bit about how we started that process?
Yeah, we knew that healthcare was a really big barrier to making a living as an artist. Artists don't have health insurance, they have sporadic income. There are all these barriers, so we did really have those conversations about what we were going to do. We thought about starting a health insurance pool, and that was too much. We thought about all these sort of big ideas. So we decided finally what the entry point was going to be was we were just going to do a health fair, and really the health fair was our way of finding out what resources already existed in our community, so that we could help artists connect to those. And it was such a little thing, we just didn't know how big of an impact it was going to have on the community. And it's been huge. So yeah, little kind of entry point that has done a lot.
Yeah.
So basically the health fair is, the format is very similar to other health fairs where there's tables with health insurance providers, clinics, there's workshops, free preventive health care screenings, things like that, but we organize it specifically for artists. So they know they're invited, they know that the healthcare providers are there for them, to talk to them. We have it at an arts venue and incorporate art in some ways, so it's really catered to the artist community.
Yeah, you were telling me earlier on, I mean, the first one of this was 8 years ago, long before the ACA and the Affordable Care Act was a thought in anybody's mind. And you started working on this on your first week on the job. Can you tell me a little bit about, because I think what I'm hearing too from Nora, where no pop-up museum has happened without a partner, with Hunter, we're talking about bringing people together with their stories and finding, with the creative interventionists, we're finding partners to do things. What was it like for you trying to find healthcare partners for something like this?
I was telling Carl that my first week on the job, I was cold calling health insurance providers and healthcare clinics and saying, hey, do you want to come to the health fair? And on the other end of the line, it would be kind of silence, like, why are you having this for artists? And I think what we realized was it was more than just connecting artists to those resources. It was also educating those resources about artists as a medically underserved community. So I guess once we kind of educated those resources about it, they didn't give it a second thought. And we've had 6 health fairs since, and we call up and we say, do you want to come to the Artist Health Fair? And they go, yeah, of course. And some of those resources we still partner with today. We have an ongoing voucher program where we team up with community clinics to offer artist vouchers that they use like a gift certificate toward services at those clinics. So it's just become another part of the community that our healthcare resources here are reaching out to, which is really cool.
Yeah. I was wondering if, as sort of an open question to both you, Hunter and Nora, about that partnership building and how it's played a role in the development of the program and then in the development of the toolkit and sharing. Can you speak to how you built partnerships and what's been important about those partnerships?
Sure, I'll go first. So the first pop-up museum that we did was with a partner that we had already worked with before on previous museum programs. It was an anarchist sewing and bike collective. And we had a pop-up museum on homemade was the theme. And I had met with 2 of the leading organizers for that group. And we just met, we talked about where we were coming from, what our goals were with the pop-up museum, and collaborated on choosing a theme that would fit their group and excite people in their community. And then we tested it out in their space, and that partnership I learned, or through that pop-up museum, I learned a lot about how, this is a program that we are bringing to other people's spaces, so it's really important to be educated in that collaborators' background and context and the community and constituents that they're really looking to engage. So we worked with them, and then after I met with that group and asked, are there things that we could have done differently? Is there something that we could improve upon? And I learned from them about just even simple techniques like bringing an umbrella. It ended up raining, so we had to move inside. So just like thinking ahead for weather conditions, or helping promote the event together, was a really big one, and I also learned how to better communicate what the pop-up museum is. I came up with a kind of paragraph, a takeaway sheet that people could leave. They could take from the pop-up museum that was a blurb about what the pop-up museum is. Because I realized the more people I met, it was, even though it's a seemingly simple idea and project, it's still sometimes difficult for people to grasp that this is a museum created by people who come to it. It's just sort of this this idea that is hard for people to understand when they're at the event. So I then met with a group that we worked with at the UCSC Arboretum on a pop-up on growth. And again, we brought the pop-up to their space, and I was always asking questions with the collaborator, you know, how is this working for this space? How is this working for your group? And it was a mix of dialogue at the event, also surveying after the event, and just really getting a feel with each person and what they're coming from and what they want out of the pop-up. So it was such a learning by doing process, and each pop-up museum had its own culture and vibe because each one had a different theme, each one had a different collaborator, each one had a different space. So even though they were all pop-ups, they almost seemed like completely different events. So each one was a learning experience.
Very cool. Hunter?
Yeah.
On partnerships and building partnerships for successful programs?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is a partnership, you know, and even in everyday life, somebody, you know, Google is our partner for this, even though they don't know it. They're powering this Hangout. So I think everything is in social life as well. And in San Francisco, I've been lucky to create a social community that is also somewhat a creative community that that I associate with and collaborate with quite frequently. I think that collaboration is huge in any project, whether it's, you know, sharing something on Facebook, or whether it's finding a space, or whether it's finding a partner to, you know, pay for a certain part of something. I think that that's sort of early on the best thing anybody can do is anytime you go out and do something, even if you're doing it on your own. You know, the Postcard project, when I started it, I would go out to the table on the street and stand there, and I'd be the only one collecting postcards, trying to get 400, 500 people, and asking every single person that walked by, trying to basically sell them to come fill out a postcard, which is not an easy task, because people actually think you are trying to sell them something. So yeah, it's important that even though I was the only one there, I was part of a larger event that, you know, had said, hey, this is a cool project, you want to come out and, you know, and set up a table here. So I was always anchored to something else, and that is very important. I think early on when you're trying to build something, you know, you can also have things that stand alone and do their own thing, but with anything, whether it's promotion, venue, whether it's the actual execution of the project, I think collaboration is a big part of everything that I do, and everything that you should be doing should entail some sort of collaboration and some sort of reaching out to people, even if it's just for, you know, for promotion or something small like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping to get a little bit into the nuts and bolts of what your toolkits are. So we talked about how the projects came to be, the partnerships that you need to make the project run successfully, and Creative Exchange tries to be a space where you can find partners, but then also where the toolkit is to do the thing. So if someone were to get maybe the Postcard project or pop-up museum or artist healthcare toolkit, what do they get out of it? Nikki,
I brought it.
What does this thing do?
Oh, I should have brought it.
It's huge. This walks you through the steps of creating a health fair. So just basically from the beginning, you know, how many people you'd like to have at the event. It talks you through how to find those healthcare resources and how to talk to them. It's from the very beginning to the very end, how to do it. There's also templates. So we came up with a timeline, all these things you need to do to organize your health fair. A sample budget, all these things. So basically, everything that has helped us create our health fair, we got organized, which was kind of an unintended consequence of putting together the toolkit, is that we had to get very organized, and are just sharing all those resources that help us run the health fair. And,
yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Is we've done this thing and we want other people to be able to do it. So what are all the steps? I know that the pop-up museum toolkit also has a number of templates. Can you walk through what the toolkit offers then, Nora?
Sure, yeah, I'm kicking myself for not bringing it, but it's about a 20-page document, and it has step-by-step guide on how to make a pop-up museum based on our experiences having them. We've had about over 30 different pop-up museums within a year, a little over a year. So based off those experiences, it's formatted in a before, during, and after stage. So before the pop-up museum, you're thinking of a theme, you think you want to work with a collaborator maybe, and so it goes in the steps of how you start those conversations. And then the during, it goes into the setup and design, and the after is sort of more about documentation and reflection and archiving the pop-up. And throughout this before, during, and after, there are anecdotal side notes and tips on just sort of what I learned throughout the process. And there's also pictures as well to help demonstrate. And then there are templates that are included for the museum label, for example, and also signage that you can put at the pop-up museum that tells participants how it all works, a sort of welcoming sign. And then if you want a way to document the pop-up and who came. So it's rather comprehensive, and it's free. It's on the Pop-Up Museum website, so you can download it there. And we don't have that many hard copies. We have a few that we've brought to conferences. But we are thinking about working on a kit that will be at the museum that people can rent out the kit as well as a trunk, which would include the sort of basic materials you need to have a pop-up museum, like black tablecloths, frames, labels, pens, tables, and that sort of setup equipment so that people can rent that out for a pop-up museum.
Yeah, awesome. Hunter, what do people get in the Neighborhood Postcard Project toolkit?
Well, it's only 10 pages, so it's not as much reading as the other toolkit, so that's a plus. Early on, speaking about collaboration and partnerships, I wrote an article for Good Magazine, which is an awesome magazine that everyone should check out if they are not familiar with it. And I immediately heard from people all over the world and said, hey, this is a really cool project. I want to do this in my community. And it was built to be an easily adaptable project, and it doesn't matter, what neighborhood you're in, whether it is, in a different language, or whether it's in, a wealthy part of town or a lower part of town in the socioeconomic level, whether it's, in a big city, whether it's in a small city, it really doesn't matter. It's meant to be adaptable. So the project, or the toolkit, sort of walks people through that. And right after that article came out, I realized, I really needed to put something out there to walk people through how to do the project where they live. So it has basic steps about how, why the project started and how to go about doing it, but then it also tells more detailed things, like language to use when you're trying to get somebody to fill out a postcard, or tips on how to find an organization or event to work with, tips on, putting signage 10 feet down the sidewalk so people can see the sign, think about it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then see your table. Little things like that folks that are doing the project for the first time might not think about and might not know, but can make a big difference in in getting more people to engage with it. Then it also provides high-resolution printable templates for the postcards themselves. So folks are able to download that. They can, if they have the skills, they can adapt it to their neighborhood and design it for their neighborhood and print them as well. So it's meant to be fully comprehensive, and again, there's both the inspiring people with the stories and the project, but also enabling them to do it. And I knew early on I wanted to make it open source. I wanted to make it available to everybody, and it's meant to be lightweight, simple. Folks have downloaded it, and collected 10 postcards. Folks have downloaded it, and I've collaborated with them more in depth, and we've created full imagery for the front of the postcard, printed hundreds, collected at huge events. So it's meant to run the full gamut of people that want to just engage with the project on a lightweight note, and folks that really want to dig in deep and really spread the project throughout their entire city.
Yeah, and I really love, I think, in all the toolkits, that they do have super practical, small things. Like I would not think to put a sign 10 feet down the road, but that makes total sense to me that now that you've said it, to have that kind of preparedness for filling out a postcard. And you mentioned a couple adaptations, Hunter. How did you write the toolkit with that adaptation in mind? And have there been like favorite adaptations, things that you've seen that you've reincorporated now that you've seen them be done by other people?
Yeah, I think I kept it very vague. So I try to think, okay, here's, and some folks had already done it while I was writing the toolkit, so it was helpful to, because I had gone into it thinking, okay, this is how. Another reason collaboration is important, and these folks were collaborating with me because they had, I kept it at a high touch engagement. So I said, if you want to do the project, email me and we'll talk about it. So it wasn't just folks, downloading a postcard with no idea what to do and then going off and doing it. It was sort of us having a back and forth about how the project would work in their community. And so yeah, folks went out and with a clipboard and with a blank postcard. And had people from, they went to a flea market, a girl in Washington, D.C. who did it, and folks from all different neighborhoods were walking by. And previously I had only done the project where I'd be in one neighborhood, and if you walked by, I'd ask you for a story about that neighborhood. So it wasn't, different people from different neighborhoods walking by, and if they were, I was only asking them for stories about that one neighborhood. So that was, even seeing things like that for the first time was like, okay, people are doing this differently. They have just a clipboard and, one pen as opposed to a full table and another event. So again, it was meant to be slightly vague and try to encompass everything that folks would do if they're trying to partner with a large organization and collect 1,000 postcards and stamp them all and send them all out and they have a bigger budget, or whether they just want to go out for one day for 10 minutes and try to collect some stories and see what happens. So it was meant to be sort of everywhere in between. And again, as I mentioned, folks that, I encourage folks to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this project here. Have you ever done it this way? Have you ever done it that way? And it's actually, so we just did it here in Akron, Ohio. We went out the National Night Out Against Crime, and our largest collection yet. We sent out 5,000 postcards and not yet collected them, so I don't know how many came in. But it's actually happened in Youngstown, Ohio, and it's happening this weekend in Canton, Ohio. So sort of taking over the state of Ohio, which I think is awesome, serendipitously all at the same time. But I think my favorite thus far has been in Chile, in a town called Antofagasta, a group there who a mutual friend of mine in San Francisco introduced me to Ciudad Emergente, or Emerging City, and they do a bunch of tactical urbanism, really cool projects in Chile. So we worked together. They translated the toolkit into Spanish. Somebody just recently translated it into Portuguese, which I still need to get up on the website. So seeing it done in different languages, I think, is really, really cool for me. And they did the project in mass in this sort of large festival in Antofagasta and in a couple different neighborhoods in cities in Chile. So that was really special for me to see it translate. You think you start off, okay, San Francisco, you have one neighborhood in mind, and then it goes around different neighborhoods in the U.S. and you can understand the context of those neighborhoods. But to see it go to a totally different country is really special.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And so coming off of that and having now the toolkit in Spanish and Portuguese, seeing as how the Neighborhood Postcard Project is based off of a written text that is sent to another person, did you encounter anything about language and language barriers or writing when you were building out the Neighborhood Postcard Project, or was that something that you thought about?
I mean, it wasn't until the project got translated into Spanish. I think that the folks that are doing in different languages are sending it to folks that are also speaking those same languages, so there's no barriers there necessarily. I think I don't worry too much about the barriers between when the postcard gets filled out or created and when it gets delivered to a random recipient, because I think the simple delivery of that message is a powerful thing. And if the postcard was filled out by a 2-year-old and it has somewhat abstract, work on the front of squiggly lines, but on the back maybe their parent helps them, write their neighborhood and write, I love my neighborhood because the park down the street, I get to play there. Maybe the person that receives it, didn't know that there's for example, in San Francisco, the Tenderloin, which is somewhat of a neighborhood that faces challenges of, again, of crime, homelessness, etc., and has somewhat of a negative reputation. People will know that the highest density of children live in that neighborhood. So somebody, a postcard that comes from a 2-year-old that seems, like, oh, whatever, it's not that great, it's just a bunch of squiggles with, a few words on the back, delivered to another neighborhood that doesn't know that children actually live there. Things like that can change perception, and you don't think that it will. So simply the deliverance of that postcard, I think, in of itself is a powerful, impactful thing for the project. And whether it gets, lost in translation, whether the person who receives it looks at it for 2 seconds and throws it away, or whether they frame it on their wall, or whether they reach out to me and say, hey, this is great, I want to meet the person that wrote this, and anywhere in that spectrum, I think the project is succeeding in what it aims to do.
Awesome. Nora, how about you? What about adaptations, and what have you learned from adaptations that you've incorporated into the pop-up museum?
Yeah, so we also wrote the kit intentionally to have it be accessible to a wide variety of people who would want to have a pop-up museum. So our audience that was in mind was roughly museum professionals or art professionals, but we also wanted it to be something that somebody who wants to hold a pop-up with their soccer group, or somebody who wants to, a teen who wants to hold it with their band or something, that it would be accessible to a wide variety of people. And like Hunter said, I also wrote it in a sort of general tone, or vague even, but using my experiences with popping up with so many different types of people as a way to gain an understanding of who would be using this kit and what are the consistencies that people will want from it. So when I was writing it, I was thinking about things that challenges that would come up with different groups, and trying to kind of smooth that out in the text. Some of the differences with the pop-up museum that have come up are whether it's being sort of popped up by an artist versus a institution versus a social group or a nonprofit. It's sort of like a frame program, and I noticed that for artists it was really, the objecthood was really important, and keeping the object safe was definitely something that was important for them, versus like a nonprofit where these objects were less important than the stories per se, so they didn't care as much about the open frame or keeping the object safe. So just noticing the differences in how people interpreted the program, and then making note of that in the anecdotal parts of the kit was a way to sort of say, well, this is what I learned when I did it with this group, which was different than this group, so you can keep that in mind when you're designing your own pop-up museum. One of the challenges, just kind of going back to the display of the pop-up museum, is that people can pick up the objects and hold them, which is very unusual for a museum, right? Where there's guards or there's glass, some kind of protection. So the pop-up museum, people are able to touch the objects and engage with them in this tactile sense that is really exciting, but also challenging for the people who are exhibiting the objects. So that was something that I noted in the kit. And then we also had a pop-up museum with an organization right next door to the museum called Next Space, which works to create public space for professionals, to create a professional environment and provide resources to entrepreneurs and young professionals. And they held a pop-up museum during their happy hour, more so as a bonding experience for their staff. So it was an intact group that was implementing the program as a way to, create a bonding time for their staff. And so that was another pop-up that was unlike the other ones that I used as an example in the kit when I was saying, there's different ways to design a pop-up for different needs. So I sort of used, I guess, the anecdote as a way to work with those adaptations, but then providing a very adoptable structure that could be used in a diverse number of venues.
Yeah, awesome. And then with sort of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and the changes that have happened in health insurance, why do we still need an artist's access? Why do we still need an artist's health fair?
It turns out that even though access to health insurance is greater, it's still really hard to understand, or it doesn't have to be. So that, you know, certainly connecting people to like health insurance brokers. Springboard, we actually serve as a navigator for our state's health insurance marketplace. So we can help people with the health insurance application. Health insurance is now legally required, so that's very important. So more important than ever to have to hold a health care for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even though the people, you get more insurance people there, you get more brokers, you get more people there.
That's true.
The form of it hasn't changed, essentially. Yeah. Have you had any adaptations or things that you incorporated into the toolkit?
We're going to. So the health fair has been replicated in 3 different communities now. And one of them, the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, actually combined theirs with the housing fair, which is really cool. Also because they named it He-Ho for health and housing, He-Ho, which is really cool. So Springboard, for our next health fair, we're thinking about branching out besides just health resources and having some more, you know, legal resources, things like that, the other health fairs. So we're certainly still learning from each other. Also, the adaptations that have happened already, they don't look the same. Some are big health fairs, some are small, some have workshops and some don't. So the last thing we wanted to do was to have people make a carbon copy of what we're doing. So it's really interesting to see what people are doing and to learn from each other.
Yeah, and the toolkit still provides sort of the bones of how to get those partnerships and how to gather the space. So that if you want to have any kind of fair, really, where you bring people together, the toolkit's a good resource for something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. One last question, and then we have a question from the Google viewing audience. How does this toolkit, how does this kind of work fit into what you want to see in the world? What's your big vision for the world, and how does this kind of toolkit fit into that? Do you have an answer?
I want people to get the health care they need.
That's a good answer.
And actually, I stole that. Nora, we have the pop-up museum in our lobby here.
Yeah, we saw that.
Which is kind of cool. Actually should run and grab it, but Carl framed the poster that we have for our healthcare program. I think it was who did this, right?
Yeah.
So in 2014, in 2014, I want everybody to get the healthcare that they need. So I kind of stole that from him, but that is my vision for the world. So we're helping in what small way we can.
I'm covered.
That's what was framed.
That was framed, and then we did a Creative Exchange did a version of the pop-up museum. Thanks, Nora. At the Asking Ideas Festival, when their prompt question was about 2024. What's your vision for 2024? So in 2024, everyone will get the health care that they need. So that is what we can do. That's what we're trying to do with the health fair toolkit. How about you, Nora? How does the pop-up museum fit into the bigger vision of the world?
Well, conceptually, it being an open source idea that's really adaptable by different people, and that it's giving this invitation to create something that's meaningful for them, but also inviting them to go further and customizing it and twisting it to fit their likings. And also empowering people to care about stories and narrative and personal objects. You know, we don't always get to exhibit things in a museum. That's not something that all of us get to do, especially in our lifetime. So this is sort of bringing that museum framework to the everyday experience and highlighting that these moments, they might not be up at the Met or the MoMA, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable and really important to community growth. So I guess another thing that the pop-up does indirectly is begs people to question authoritative institutional critique and these sort of pseudo-omnipresent issues of value, and that a museum is something that is more conceptual than it is physical, and that we can learn by having them and empowering people to have the confidence to be their own curator or be, you know, play with these terms in a way that's productive for discussion.
Yeah, awesome. Hunter, how does the Neighborhood Postcard Project, how does the work of the creative interventionists fit into your big vision for the world?
I think that I am a believer that if the more people that we talk to and the more experiences that we're able to understand, the richer of a person we become. And so there's a quote I often reference by the writer Chimamanda Adichie, who says that the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. So stereotypes exist, yes, without a doubt, oftentimes based somewhat on truth, yes, but based on the whole truth, no. So, you know, is one neighborhood more higher crime than the other? Probably. Is, you know, one type of person more likely to live somewhere than somewhere else? Probably. Is somebody to drive a certain type of car more likely to, you know, vote a certain way or whatever? Yes, probably. But there's a lot more to that story, and so we're selling ourselves short, I think, if we don't get that full story. And then Ronald Reagan, believe it or not, said that a lot of the troubles in this world would disappear if we were talking to each other instead of about each other. So that's something else that the Postcard Project and the League of Creative Interventionists and my work in general tries to do, is to get people to talk to each other. Simple as that, to talk to strangers, and to realize that, you know, just by talking to a stranger, you never know what's going to happen. And we were talking about collaboration and partnerships earlier, and I think we can all agree that, you know, at some point we had to talk to a stranger to help ourselves get somewhere in our creative work. And at some point we talked to a stranger in our personal life. You know, at some point your best friend was a stranger. At some point your partner or spouse was a stranger. And so if you never take that chance in the first place, you're never going to be able to get those opportunities and those experiences that I think make life and the world something great and worth living for. And so really that's sort of the overarching goal of all of my work, is to simply get people talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Can I just make one point off of that, because that was really inspiring, Hunter, and something that I think the pop-up museum that applies to sort of my dream for the world is also just to get people in the same space and time, and having open dialogue that's just exciting for everybody involved. So something that the pop-up museum does is it gets people together for, even if it's a short period of time, they're still together in the same space. And when you get that kind of combination, anything is kind of possible. So it's definitely, there's a real substance to that. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to second what Hunter was saying about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we have a question from Jesus Ramirez, which asks, how can this project help a muralist? And from each of the three sort of toolkit projects that we're highlighting, I can spin off help for muralists. How would an artist help fair help a muralist?
It would help them connect to healthcare, health insurance. It was in their community.
Yeah.
So, and I should say we were talking about whether the project has been adapted by artists or organizations before. And the health fair has been exclusively adapted by organizations to date, but that's not to say that artists couldn't do one themselves. Mm-hmm. So, or a group of artists.
Yeah. Nora, Hunter?
So I think it could work in two folds. One being that it could be a sort of after the mural is already painted, a celebration or exhibit of the mural, and having people come, and it could be a pop-up museum that there are just empty frames that people could like put up to the mural and take pictures, or and then the other is it being before the mural is painted. If the muralist is trying to do a community mural and source ideas about what people in that neighborhood feel should go up on the walls, there could be a kind of pop-up with the prompt saying, you know, this mural could look like this, ... and then people could have cards to illustrate what some of their ideas, and then the muralist could collect those cards and influence his or her mural in that sense too.
Hunter, projects that might help a muralist that you're thinking of?
I think the Neighborhood Postcard Project is, again, at its very basic level, breaking down stereotypes and connecting people, which I think murals do as well, and create, as Nora mentioned, shared space or shared experience. I actually just did my first mural in Philadelphia, and we used a similar method to the Postcard Project in sending out postcards to random people. We took invites, little invite cards that were postcards, attached a tube of paint and a paintbrush to each individual card, and then deliver those randomly to people in a neighborhood that was next to the neighborhood where we were painting the mural, and sort of invited those people via these invite cards to come over to this mural. It was a crowdsourced mural, so to speak. Invited them to come add to this mural. So we created the outline of the mural first in the Belmont neighborhood in West Philadelphia, which doesn't have the best reputation, and then sent these invites to neighbors in the West Powelton neighborhood, which is somewhat of a different set of circumstances. It's right next to the university. A lot more university students live there, and we invited them to come over and add to this mural in Belmont neighborhood. So I think murals can be a way to discover a new neighborhood as well, and can often attract people to a new neighborhood. And by being in a new neighborhood, if anything breaks down those stereotypes, actually going to that neighborhood and seeing it is definitely going to break them down.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time today, Nikki and Nora and Hunter. And it's really inspiring to hear you talk about your projects and your toolkits as the way to bring people together and to share stories, to actually make things happen and do things together. If you have other thoughts, you can reach me at that super long email address, creativeexchange@springboardforthearts.org, or tweet at us at createexchange. You can check out all the stories, the toolkits that we have aggregated at www.springboardexchange.org. And stay in touch. Keep on doing wonderful work. Thanks for watching, everybody, today, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.